All right, so we got a golf ball up there, 325 yards, way out there. All right, let's see what we can do. All right, here we go. 325 yards. See if we can hit a golf ball. Here we go. All right. Here you go. Oh, I might have hit the tree on that. So there's that branch that's right above it. Oh! Golf ball, baby! Yeah! 3 shots. That's what I'm talking about. Let's go check it out. Look at that. Look at that. 2 within, geez, what about an inch of each other? There she is. 3 shots. Awesome. All right, so there it is. I absolutely love that white powder from the golf balls. I just can't get enough of it. And being able to do that with the FX Impact M3 and the 22 caliber. One of the things that I want to talk to you today about is going a little bit more in depth of what's going inside this barrel. This is the most advanced barrel system that's in the industry right now. So I talked a lot about the FX integrated harmonic barrel tuner in my last video. The fact that we're doing a lot of dampening in the barrel shroud, and also we have the tuning weight here at the end. But one of the bigger advancements that I think is going to really change the industry is what FX has done with their barrel kits. So FX has done a ton of research in pairing that carbon fiber sleeve in a very specific way into their barrel kits to give you the utmost accuracy. So no matter if you're shooting pellets, but specifically where this really shines is when you're really starting to push the power levels on the FX Impact M3 to those higher levels. Because as you do that, the harmonic signature of your rifle becomes a lot more magnified. So in order to be able to both tame those and then also be able to tune those harmonics, what FX has done within their carbon fiber sleeve approach is they're actually tensioning it and sandwiching it between the actual barrel liner and the outer housing. And so what that's doing is giving you a very rigid barrel. And combined with the FX integrated harmonic tuning shroud, we're damping the longitudinal harmonic waves that are within the barrel to minimize those as much as possible with the damping system in the shroud combined with the carbon fiber sleeve. But then the carbon fiber sleeve is also lowering the amplitude of the transverse waves. So then what we're doing with the tuning weight is we're tuning to an accuracy node. So what I have found with free floating barrel systems is you still want to be able to find that controllable harmonic frequency. And so being able to time it. So up to this point, we've been doing that with velocity, but now combined with the fine tuning of the velocity, and then you also be able to shift the center of gravity with the barrel weight and the dampening that's going on in this system, that carbon fiber sleeve combined with the harmonic tuning system, it's creating this perfect balance of both rigidity and the controllability of those harmonics. So the last few years, I've been doing a lot of research, not just in the airgun world, but more specifically what precision shooters are doing, like in 22 bench rests with powder burners, and talking to F-class shooters and PRS shooters and ELR shooters to kind of just pick their brains of what are they doing in like high power center fire in the rimfire world. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, physics is physics, right? So obviously their platforms are just much higher power. Their harmonics are much more pronounced in their platforms. But there's a lot we can learn from what they're doing in those sports and bring this over to the airgun world. And so I was able to interview Ian Clem, the 2020 F-Class National Champion. And so the reason why I wanted to interview Ian is because I noticed in his the photo posted in the national championship was he's running a barrel tuner. So when I saw that, I was thinking to myself, wait a second, and if F-Class, if they're able to do such precise hand loading of their cartridges, and they're obviously running barrel profiles larger than what we do with air guns, why is he choosing to run a barrel tuner? So this is a really interesting interview. So if you are into precision air gunning, or if you just like one hole groups, I don't care if it's at even 50 yards, you got to check out this interview. So thanks to everybody for joining us. I'm actually here today with Ian Clem, and thank you so much for allowing me to interview you today, because I think we're starting to see a lot of different things that, you know, relate from competitive firearm shooting to air gunning. So
yeah, I have to come out with an alibi right away in that I don't know very much at all about air gunning. We were trying to kill some time one time in Arizona after a big match at Ben Avery, and one of my buddies had just gone to this air gun shop, and he saw one of the employees there shoot a smaller group with one of the FX impacts, I think, than he was shooting with his high-dollar German rimfire target rifle. And so long story short, he brought that home and let me try it, and I've been kind of intrigued. I've got a bit of an obsessive personality, so at one point I think I'll probably delve into it and join you guys and have fun, because it looks like you guys are having a lot of fun with it. But I was just astonished with the precision that it's not like what we grew up with, you know. So like most of the guys, I'm kind of a precision fanatic, and that's going to draw me in sooner rather than later. But happy to be here and talk about the centerfire stuff that I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And whenever you're ready to make that leap, let us know, because it is a rabbit hole that has been fun to go down for sure.
I bet.
And so we could talk about a bazillion different things that goes into your process to be as successful as you've been. But the purpose of today's interview is really to talk about harmonics, and even specifically barrel harmonics. And I feel like a lot of people describe it a different way. It means something different to them personally. And so I really want to ask you, like, talk about what barrel harmonics are specifically in your own words, and maybe how it affects the precision or the lack thereof for your shot groups at given ranges.
Okay, that's like a 3-beer question. So how much time do you have? We're going to have to get together after hours or something. But I think I'll try and oversimplify it a little bit. I think that pressing the easy button for shooters who know just enough to be dangerous is to use that phrase barrel harmonics. Mm-hmm. And it's almost becoming cliche now. It's like, why is my rifle doing this? Or why does it like this ammo versus that ammo? And you can just say, because barrel harmonics, you know, because science, because reasons. And actually getting into the mechanics of it and what's going on is daunting. And I'm not there. I'll be the first person to admit, but it's interesting enough to me that I want to keep experimenting with it. And I try to make sense of my observations. So what I think is going on is, you've heard this phrase called barrel time. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to give more and more credence to barrel time, right? I used to think, you've got these nodes, and these nodes are the happy spot for the barrel, and you want to find a node and you want to just live in that happy spot. And I think as shooters, we see the end result of a lot of different subsystems that are in motion during that ballistic event. I mean, I did it right there. I just called it a ballistic event as if it was a moment in time. Right. It's not, you know, and you're probably understanding that now, in that, okay, you've got to, you know, pull this man-machine interface known as a trigger rearward. So you've got that system moving. That trips a sear, releasing some potential energy, usually stored in compressed gas or a compressed spring or something like that. You've got that system. Now you've got that potential energy converting into kinetic energy, and there's a lot of different subsystems And oh, by the way, the projectile you're trying to motivate out of a 30-inch barrel, in my case, it takes a while for that to happen. We call that internal ballistics. There's a lot of things that are going on internally in that rifle before you can even get into BC and atmospherics and things like that. So each one of those events that I sort of tried to skim over, you could analyze that and probably do a thesis on it. And it's going to have a characteristic equation, a dynamic equation that will describe what's going on. Well, the so what to all of this is what we experience in a single event is pretty complex. It's deterministic. You can calculate all those things, but the math is beyond me, right? And so what we do indirectly is we make these observations about what our projectiles do downrange. And then we start backing up and saying, well, what influence does my rifle have on those projectiles? Like why do this a certain set of inputs yield a better result than another? And so that's where most people spend their time. And so they have these levers that they're pushing and pulling to try to influence that result. The errors that we're measuring are small enough that we can isolate some cause and effect between some of those things we're trying to influence. And so historically for F-class and high power in general, it's how am I crafting this ammunition? That's a big influence I can have over the system. And so, you can choose one primer versus another. Obviously, propellant selection. The traditional ones are charge weight of propellant. Mm-hmm. So that would be synonymous in your world for, the plenum pressure maybe that you're delivering. It can be projectile. There's a lot of different intrinsic characteristics of projectile, like weight or shape. Those are the two big ones. Mm-hmm. But projectile choice, and then you can start kind of tuning the system with how you're treating those components. Fill rate of your propellant inside the cartridge that it can burn in. The proximity of your projectile to the rifling in your bore, that's a big one. You've heard people probably talk about doing jump testing or seating depth testing. Yeah.
Chasing the lands.
Yep. And, I was the same way in terms of thinking what I was doing was getting a relationship between the projectile and the barrel that the barrel liked. Mm-hmm. And now I've come to realize that it's an indirect way of influencing that thing called barrel time. Mm-hmm. The reason why we call it jump testing is because that's what we can measure. We can't measure the barrel time, but guess what? We can grab our calipers or a mic with a comparator and we can measure cartridge overall length. We can measure base to ogive of the bullet. We can measure lengths really easily. Mm-hmm. So we'll say, well, this is the cartridge overall length that allows this system to be in tune. And what you're really influencing, I think, is barrel time. Yeah. And more specifically, the relationship between the projectile as it's leaving the barrel. Right. That's where I think a lot of the barrel tuning comes into play. Yeah. Now, to answer your original question about harmonics, I think all those dynamic equations that influence the barrel movement, I think the barrel's moving in a couple different ways, and some are more influential to what we care about, precision, than others. So one of the things I collect is old target rifles from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the ones that are coming from Germany, Switzerland, Austria, they were playing with vibration dampening materials long before we started to get into it, which is really fascinating for me because, as an engineer, I want to get a new rifle in and take it apart and see, why did they go to all this trouble of putting in a thixotropic or a strain rate dependent material like a urethane in between the barrel and the action? Well, I think they're trying to isolate, all the vibration contributions that are coming from the fire control, the action that we just talked about, the stock, the shooter's input on the stock. They're trying to sort of take some of those terms from this huge system of equations, and they're trying to remove some of those equations so that you're just dealing with the vibration of the barrel, making it a little bit more pure.
So let's talk about that a second, because whenever I first got into big bore air gunning, everyone kept on talking about how horrible the harmonics were. And so I first thing I went out was grabbed one of those rubber donut things. I threw it on the gun and I tried to play with it. And I realized it really, as a dampening device, I think maybe it did something, but as a tuning device, these macro movements up and down the barrel really, maybe I got lucky and I found a spot, but there was really no way of like precisely controlling that. And I think I was realizing it was at such a microscopic level that something like that wasn't really the right tool for the job. Yeah. So the other thing that we've got going on in the airgun world, and it's been happening quite some time, people have been carbon fiber sleeving our barrels because our barrel profiles are very, very thin as compared to something like an F class or like ELR. And so carbon fiber sleeving and tensioning maybe kind of similar to like what like proof research is done, kind of that type of approach. But you said something in a podcast interview that I actually want to kind of chase down a little bit, is that idea that one, no matter how big and thick of a barrel that you have, 1.25 inch, huge long 30+ inch ELR barrel, or super short, stiff carbon fiber tension barrel, you're still going to have harmonics. And whenever I first got into this, I thought there was just this holy grail that you were able to like completely cancel that out. But I realized right away that that was not the case. Yeah. But you said something in that interview you said where it is advantageous to be able to have consistency of those harmonics, to be able to control them and tune them. So maybe talk to me a little bit more about that.
There's two kind of ways you can deal with specifically barrel harmonics to be consistent. I think you can try to limit the movement of a barrel, and that's pretty traditional. That's where we got into bull barrels, in the 40s and 50s, turning sporter hunting rifles into varmint rifles. We wanted to be able to sustain a rate of fire so the barrel didn't get too hot. So that encouraged us to add weight to the barrel. But we noticed, well, as we add weight and make that barrel stiffer, sometimes the precision will increase. And usually it was noticed at, 100 yards, 200 yards. Growing up in Wisconsin, I thought 200 yards was a really long poke, as you probably did. But there's this new school of thought, and that's what I kind of was getting into with the other podcast was, if you can't eliminate the different ways a barrel's going to move, if you can't control that and get it to be just dead, why not try to understand it at least from an effect standpoint, and then work with it, leverage it, make it do some work for you.
So maybe you could just tell us what is positive compensation, just from a theoretical standpoint.
Okay, real simply, positive compensation is sort of timing it so that your projectiles will exit a barrel in the most advantageous way based on their differing velocities. Mm-hmm. So if you've got 10 rounds and the slowest round will exit when the barrel has reached a higher attitude in its whip, in its movement. And why would you want that to be the case? Well, that way, since it's inherently going to be slower and experience more drop down range at a given distance, you'll have given it a bit of a head start, an advantage in angle of departure. So by the time you reach your intended target, maybe it's 600 yards, maybe it's 1,000 yards, it's going to have a more similar point of impact as the fastest round in that 10, which exited when the barrel was at a less steep incline. So we know that we're going to have a variance in our ammunition. We can't make sure that every round is going to leave with the exact same exit velocity. So as long as you have that variance, well, positive compensation takes some of the vertical spread out downrange by allowing the slower rounds to exit at a steeper angle, allowing the faster rounds to exit at a more shallow angle. Back to the departure from short and stiff, that's trying to make the barrel less sensitive to variation. Variation in a few different inputs, but exit velocity variation is trying to make the barrel less sensitive to that. If we extend our range, like you talked before we started filming about shooting, your air rifles hundreds of yards, if not 1,000 yards, which is kind of mind blowing to me. And I want to talk to you about that later. But when you have an arena that's in the ELR range, I mean, ELR for some of your air rifles is probably 300 yards.
Oh, it's just an economy of scale. I mean, if you think about it, ballistically speaking and velocity, everything we're shooting is subsonic, or it should be subsonic if we're doing it correctly.
So dispersion is like an angular thing that we're trying to beat, right? So the angular error, as evidenced by dispersion of a shot pattern at 100 yards, is pretty small. That's why you look at a leaderboard for short range bench rest and you think, well, they're all awesome shots, awesome rifles, because they're all egging, 0.2 or something. And the difference is, thousandths of an inch. Well, now you multiply that by an order of magnitude, you're shooting at 1,000 yards and you can't suffer the same variances in exit velocity. We have to measure powder charge. We can't just throw powder charges. And it's become competitive enough now that we're departing from the short stiff and we're saying, okay, if I can increase my barrel movement, maybe I can slow it down, experience a wider area or advantageous exit attitude for that barrel in a given load, and exploit that. So it's kind of hard to visualize, but if you have a short stiff barrel that's vibrating in a low amplitude, high frequency waveform, it's trying to approximate a straight line. It's got these reverberations in it, and then it's got some compressions and expansions within its bore. And they're coming pretty frequently, relatively speaking. You see a lot of periods within that waveform along the barrel. If you make that barrel longer or smaller in diameter, basically less stiff, you've departed from that school of thought where you're trying to limit the barrel movement, and now you're almost exacerbating it. You're allowing it to move. But the reason it's okay to do that is because now the period of that waveform is getting bigger. You have less opportunities to have your projectiles exit the barrel at an advantageous attitude of the muzzle, but each one individually is bigger, is broader. The amplitude is also bigger, but now you have a deeper region of interest that you can exploit for positive compensation. You're not trying to hit the nail on the head with a very specific, tight node. Now you've got a big, broad, healthy node, and you put a tuner on the end of a muzzle. It's like hanging a cantilevered weight, in classic in physics. You're gonna increase that amplitude and decrease the frequency of barrel whip once again. And now you've given yourself a third lever. So traditionally we had seating depth for barrel time. We had charge weight for barrel time. Well, we all load our ammo before we travel to a big match across the country. Those levers are gone now. We've already predetermined what our seating depth and our charge weight is. we get to our intended destination, the atmospherics are a little different. The temperature maybe is a little different. Now we've got a third lever that we can manipulate, and that is the tuner.
With air rifles, what we're kind of doing, how you all do, your primer, your charge, and your seating depth, we're basically trying to find an advantageous pressure with a corresponding hammer spring tension when it hits the valve, that you get very tight standard deviations and extreme spreads. And so step one is finding that harmony. Because like if here's your pressure, here's your valve, and you're hitting it too hard, now you're seeing your velocities kind of jumping around all over the place. And so when we find that point of harmony, I have found it to be like, okay, do I really want to go back and touch that? Like, it's like, I've got that so tight. This other variable, the harmonic node or whatever it is we're chasing scientifically, if I change this, it's also changing, even in the most minute way, the harmonic signature of the overall platform. So you're almost like messing with two variables versus isolating it and just messing with one. If I can get my rifle into that point of harmony, right, with these very tight velocities, I've isolated it. So now I can just mess with the harmonics of the barrel. So it's like I'm not chasing three different things around. And as an engineer, you know that you pull on one lever and it might change something over here. And isolating one factor, I think, is a really interesting way that how barrel tuners kind of do that.
Yeah, I think that's like, Rifle Geeks 101 is single variable experiments. Yep. Sometimes people want to make the most of a range session. Mm-hmm. So they say, well, I've got 40 rounds. I could test primers, charge weight, and tuner position all in the same visit, and it'll be extremely efficient. And they walk away with no meaningful data whatsoever.
Or
so less is more.
Or walk away thinking that they have seen like the holy grail of something, and then go back to the range next time and be completely different because they were wrong.
It was happenstance. Yeah. So I think, between the two sports, the air gunning and the centerfire rifles, it shares way more in common than I originally thought, before today. But I think, taking that tuner and doing a no kidding evaluation with, when I come back a week later, is that cherry setting still the one that produces the same results? Oftentimes I'll be shooting with a coworker and, I'll have my competition rifle out, just running a simple test. And they'll ask, well, why are you putting that Mirage shield on your barrel? You're only shooting 10 rounds to confirm something. It's not going to get that hot. And I said, you're right. The reason I use a Mirage band is to defeat that local mirage that's obscuring my vision. But there's no way I'd shoot one round for science without it on, because at that point, it's influencing the system. I need to match that barrel influence. I've got. That's why we put little paint marks on our fasteners so that they're always clocked in the same position. It's why if you tune with a sunshade on your scope, you should compete with that sunshade on your scope.
So, I think obviously we could probably talk about, like you said, this is like a 3 to 12 beer conversation probably, but I think we've covered this at a really good level. Obviously, I think anyone who claims to say that they have figured all of this out is they need to learn themselves. It's like we're all still learning, and it's refreshing to know that someone as smart as you, as experienced as you, and as accomplished as you is like comes from that same viewpoint of that we are all still learning. We're all still learning together, and that idea of like sharing techniques and strategies. And I really love this idea of this convergence of the airgun world with centerfire precision shooting, because there's so many things we can learn from you all. And quite honestly, my goal is to get some of you guys into airgunning as well. So.
Yeah, it would be great if there could be in the future maybe airgun divisions of traditional combustion type shooting sports, like there have been with pistol and things like that.
Yeah, just last year, NRL 22 created a category for us, and so we
awesome
using NRL 22. So, by a PRS Airgunner League would be awesome, And for me, my thing would be like, F class or ELR for air guns would just be absolutely awesome. And obviously, like I said, it's an economy of scale, but if we could bring things into like, 200, 300, maybe out to 500 yards, because ballistically speaking, we're shooting at like 950 feet per second. So what does that equate to, for you guys?
Exactly. I mean, it's pure marksmanship. That's what it's about. If someone took away all my centerfire rifles tomorrow and said, you can only shoot a 17 caliber air rifle painted hot pink for the rest of your life, I would shoot it and be happy. It's still marksmanship, and it's good fun. So, but the biggest thing I could leave you with the tuner thing is, don't take what I say or anyone else says. There's a lot of dogma online, and there's so many ways to skin this cat. But the biggest thing is, believe what you see, believe what you experience. There were a lot of things that I read that were supposed to make me shoot smaller in terms of reloading. I took the time to go out and test them and said, you know what? Not only does it not help, but sometimes it hurts. So for me, I'm not going to take that step in the loading room. Tuners is one of those things. If you're interested in precision, you owe it to yourself to try it, and believe your own observations and stay open-minded, and stay in the mindset where not only are you trying to help yourself improve, but your fellow competitors and your friends. We're not going to be right about everything all the time. That's why, we continue to learn and revise our own programs, because we're learning new things. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for taking the time for joining us up here on Up North Air Gunners. So hopefully we can get you out shooting. Hopefully I can go to an F class match. I'd love to see what you guys are doing, but it's just awesome how we're kind of coming together on this stuff. I just want to say thank you again.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Take care.
So there it is, everybody. I absolutely love talking to other professionals in other sports, being able to learn from them, kind of hear some of the things they're doing, bringing that back into our sport. So being able to collaborate and talk with these other shooters in these other sports and bringing that back into the world of air gunning. So the FX Impact M3 is definitely a game-changing platform, and all the little different intricacies they've baked into this thing, it really is going to take our sport to the next level. So thanks, everybody, for joining me. Take care.